Hello, Annette. How are you?
Doing good. Overcoming my booster shot.
Oh yeah. Did it cause you a problem?
It just caused me muscle aches and pains all day yesterday, but I slept it off.
Yeah. I had a sore, I got my flu shot and booster at the same time. And the flu shot actually, that arm hurt more than the other one, believe it or not.
I got my flu and shingles at the same time. Had to wait 2 weeks to get the booster and then I've got to wait another 2 weeks to get the second shingle shot.
Oh boy. Yeah, I've got my shingles a while ago. Hopefully I'm still good with that. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Marty's sister recently had it and it stimulated me to go ahead and get it done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've known several people over the years. I've actually known several young people that have gotten it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my experience. Two people in their 20s I knew way back that got it, and it was really crippling for them. So. Hi, Kime. How are you?
Hi, Dennis. We're doing well today. I hope you guys had a great weekend.
Yeah, no complaints.
Good.
Saw a friend that I haven't seen in 10 years. He lives out in California. Him and his wife came to Pinehurst, invited us over, and so we had a real nice time catching up with them, seeing those folks. They're really, really great people. And also met some new people, some horse people that live in Southern Pines. That was pretty fun too.
Good. Sounds like a great weekend.
It was. Hey, Grant, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, Dennis. How are you?
Yeah, no complaints. Doesn't do any good to complain, right?
Just gotta keep pushing through.
Man. So, what is our meeting ID, Grant? Do you know?
Our meeting ID?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I will try and figure that out.
Yeah, if you can, that'd be great. Hmm.
How about let's try this 252
Yep.
550 0833.
Okay.
To it.
It says now it's asking for my meeting passcode. Do we have a meeting passcode? Sorry to be such a pain.
Q75VMU is what I've got.
275 VMU.
MU.
No. Is it a Q
Was
in
that-
there somewhere?
Yeah, it was a Q75.
Okay, Q75. Q75
VMU.
VMU. Yay, it worked. Good. Okay, got it. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm trying to use my iPad to kind of monitor so I can see what you all see when I share my screen and stuff like that.
So your iPad Pro 12.9 inch?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, good to know.
Hey, Jamiris, how are you?
Doing amazing. How are you?
Great. How's that chicken and waffle business going? All right.
Going well. It's going well.
Fantastic. There's Sana. Hey, Sana.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. Loved your video. That was cool.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was a lot of fun.
Did you have a lot of people?
It was not a lot of people there in the audience. I would say maybe 20, 25 or so.
That's pretty good.
But they stayed throughout the presentation, so that was good. Nobody walked out.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Well, I heard that the attendance for the state fair was down quite a bit because of, I guess because of COVID.
It had to have been because I went on the weekend just to have, just to set things up with Heidi. It was really, really crowded. The first Saturday, I think it was afternoon. And then when I went for the actual show on Wednesday, it did not look like the state fair. There was hardly any crowd.
Let's see. Let's see. Hey, Jennifer Hyde, how are you?
Hi, Dennis. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
I want you to sign up for Shop Rural Day with your art.
Okay. I
think-
thought I did already, but it's on my list to check out.
Okay, if you haven't got any kind of correspondence from a person named Alex,
Okay.
then it didn't go through. So
Okay.
yeah, I'll double check on it too. But I really think it'd be great for you to introduce the world to your art.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Okay, well, I guess running a little bit over, so we'll go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to talk about something called category design, and it may not be that familiar to you, but after you get introduced to it, it'll make a lot of sense, particularly in the context of branding. So just to give you an example of a category might be hair dryers, right? So you could have different products that are in the category hair dryer, but that may not be a great example. But that's one I always use. That there are different categories, and sometimes, believe it or not, you can actually create a new category and be the only person in it, the only company in it. So be thinking about stuff like that as we go through this. This is going to be more Techstars material. This guy does not talk as fast as the branding guy, but he's great. He's really good. And I think that you all will enjoy it. So let me share my screen here. And everybody can see it, I suppose. According to my iPad, everyone can see it. So this is a kind of introduction to category design. And I think, like I said, once you hear kind of what they're talking about, it'll make a lot of sense. And what I'm trying to do here in these first couple weeks or so of the class is get everybody thinking about their brand positioning, the category that they're competing in, because I think it's important, particularly if you go live on Shop Rural Day, that you can quickly give people a handle on what it is that you're doing, what your product and service is all about.
So I want to walk you through the basic ideas about what category design is all about and how to think that way and how to take your company in that direction if that's something you want to do. So this is basically an overview, but some behind the scenes stuff about the book too. Just want to start out with a few reasons why it's important to think this way. And so one is everybody in this room probably knows and feels that it's way easier to start a company today than it was 20 years ago. Grab a laptop and a credit card, get on AWS, join up with somebody like Techstars. A couple people can have a company up and running in no time that can compete with the giants of the world. But what that means is that if anybody has a really interesting idea in an interesting new space, it quickly looks like this. With 1,000 other companies piling in to do what you're already trying to do. So it becomes really hard to stand out unless you are establish yourselves as some kind of a leader, a thought leader, a category king in a particular space. And another reason to try to go for this idea of category king and category creation is that in any market that's really that's digital, it's a winner-take-all kind of situation. And you can measure that any way you want. Market share, you look at on-demand transportation, and Uber is the obvious category king in this space. It takes 73% of the market share, Lyft 23%. And so market value is another way you could measure it. And Airbnb in particular space worth 30-some billion dollars. When HomeAway was sold, it was worth about $4 billion. Whether it's, you measure it by total usage. In the space of online storage, Dropbox kind of identified the category and came to dominate it. And even with all of Google's power and capabilities, it still only has 70% of the usage of this kind of online storage space. And another interesting reason for wanting to be a category king is the category kings tend to attract the best people. And here's a way we know about this. About a year ago, LinkedIn decided to do a study using its data to try to figure out what were the 25 companies that the most talented people in the world want to work for. And when a little background story on this, when LinkedIn wanted to do the study, they ran the data, but they also brought in a woman named Susie Welch to analyze the data and write about it. Now, Susie Welch is a pretty famous business journalist. She used to be the editor of Harvard Business Review. She also happens to be married to Jack Welch, who was the former CEO of General Electric and also kind of a business character in his own right. And we didn't even really know about this project. And then one of my co-authors, Al Ramadan, got a call one day from Susie Welch saying, we're doing this study, and I happen to have been reading your book. And I noticed that if you map the companies that are landing on that list of the ones people want to work for to the idea of category kings, most of the companies on the list are identifiably category kings. And she wanted to talk to us about the dynamics and why that was. But towards the end of the interview, Al thought he'd ask, he says to Susie, well, how did you end up running across our book? And this was one of my favorite things I ever heard about the book was she said, well, my husband's Jack Welch. And I was like, yeah, I know who Jack Welch is. And she said, well, Jeff Bezos gave your book to my husband and said, you should read this. And then my husband gave it to me and said, you should read this. So that's apparently we're floating around in some pretty high, stratospheric circles there. But the bottom line here is that is also a really good reason to want to identify yourself as this category king. So I wanted to walk you back a little bit because this is not something that was just based on anecdotal evidence or just our particular instincts. When we started this project, we really wanted to back it up with some real data and background information. I'll walk you through this crazy chart here. We took data from thousands of venture-backed companies and just ran it and asked a whole lot of questions of this data and trying to just see what kind of patterns we could get out of it. And we ran across this one thing that we thought was kind of interesting, but we didn't quite know what it meant, but we'll get to that in a second. But what this ends up showing is that when we looked at the value created by venture-backed companies after they went public, post-IPO value, we noticed this pattern that if companies that went public before they were 6 years old, the trend line basically had them dropping in value from IPO time to after the post-IPO value tended to go negative. Companies that went public between 6 and 10 years old created enormous post-IPO value. And companies that went public after they were 10 years old tended to basically flatline. Didn't really lose value, they didn't really excite anybody either. And we wondered what this meant. We took it to places like Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan, the investment bankers there, and we said, showed them this, and they said, this matches our instincts. This matches what we see. We never ran the data, but actually it's really interesting that, this kind of proves out, but kind of makes sense to us. But they didn't know why this was happening either. So we went searching, and we ran the next step when we asked why this was happening. Oh, by the way, yeah, here's just as a little reminder of that 6 to 10, some of the biggest successes. Facebook went public at 8 years, Amazon at 8 years, Salesforce at 6. Uber in 2018 is 9 years old, so it suggests that if they go public in a year and a half, just don't buy the stock. So we asked, why is this happening? And that led us to the work of an economist named Paul Gorowski. And Paul Gorowski studied category life cycles. And he ended up creating this very simple chart that has 2 steps to it, and I'll walk you through each one. So the first step is and this makes intuitive sense if you think about it. When a new category gets identified, and you're down here basically, and one company or 2 companies figure out that there's some new invention, some new cool thing to do, there's hardly any companies in a space. As soon as, think back to that chart with a zillion companies on it, as soon as it starts to be identified that it's interesting space, zillions of companies jump in, right? You get this spike in the number of companies in the space, and then you get this time period when the number of companies starts to drop off because 1 or 2 kings solidify. They either acquire some of the other companies in the space or the other companies go out of business. And so the number of companies in that category starts to fall into a smaller number. And then over time, it kind of flatlines. It kind of stabilizes at a few companies that are dominating that space. The other half of the curve goes like this, which is when a category is created, obviously it's worth pretty much nothing. And it takes a while for people to get the idea and it starts to have some real value to that category. And then all of a sudden it catches on and it spikes. The total value of that category starts to spike. And over time it matures and levels off. So Gorowski put these together and created this chart of what a category life cycle looks like. And as you can imagine, the value is still climbing. The number of companies pile in, even though the value is not there. Suddenly the category catches on, king emerges, and it consolidates. But the category is actually taking off now and spiking. And then you get to some place where there's 2 or 3 companies dominating, and the category is pretty much mature and flatlining. And as you can probably tell, when you look at that chart and you say, well, that kind of overlaps to this. And it makes some sense because in this particular phase, the category is very uncertain and who's going to be the king is very uncertain. So you get situations like Groupon going public when it was 3 years old, and you've got a category that looked really promising but ended up not being so promising, and a company that went public at a huge valuation and ended up tanking afterwards. In this particular time period, you end up with 1 or 2 companies emerging that seem like they're going to be the obvious kings of this spiking category, and investors are very excited. That's when you want to put money in a company, and so the value starts to climb because it's got a lot of upside. And then in this last phase over here, what tends to happen is that as the category sort of matures and flatlines and the number of players consolidates, it's all of the excitement is out of it. It's just basically a mature stock at play at that point. So that's why when companies go public when they're late, it doesn't do bad, it doesn't do good. It's just that all of the information is already there, right? You're not really investing in something that's going to spike. So we still, we're asking the question of, but why is that happening? Why do those time frames make sense? And that led us to brain science, of all things. And I had a role in this because this is a book that I wrote, came out in 2011, that was about the intersection of brain science and computer science and how those two fields were learning from each other. And by doing this book, it plugged me into the neuroscience community. And of course, we were big fans of Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which is all about our brains and how they work and the biases that we have inside of our brains. And so I took the data and the research we had done to a few of my neuroscience friends and said, what does this mean to you? How does this map to anything that you understand? And they said, absolutely, it does. And they started talking to us about the cognitive biases in our brains. And cognitive biases are these things in our brains that make us make decisions that are not based on logic. We actually don't make decisions based on facts. We make decisions based on these biases that get embedded in our brains. And there's some 50 of them. Like one is the choice supportive bias, which just means that if you buy a particular product, you tend to think it's the best product because you were so smart because you bought it. It's just out of a flywheel that goes around. And groupthink is what it sounds like. We tend to be influenced by what people think around us. And these biases influence our decisions in a very, very meaningful way. So there's another aspect of things that the neuroscience are talking to us about, and this leads us back to some of the category conversation, that when there's too much choice, when there's a lot of stuff out there, our brains categorize things. And that's why, for instance, when you go in the grocery store, it's not arranged alphabetically. It's arranged by categories, because that's how you think. And you want to go in and you want to find the spaghetti sauce, and you go to the aisle where the spaghetti sauce is, and then you make the choice out of a bunch of things that are on the shelf. Interestingly, in business, a line item on a budget is essentially a category. And that's how, again, we think when we run a company. We need, I know I need some public relations, for my company. And then you think, what's the company that's the most, the dominant one, or the one that, is most important for me to engage in that category. So a winning category strategy actually creates a new line item. If you're a B2B company, creates a new line item on somebody's budget. And so when we create these categories in our minds, and our biases tend to put one or two category kings in that space. When you go to the spaghetti sauce aisle, you probably think there's a spaghetti sauce that you think is the best one or the best value for you to buy, and it's already in your brain. You're not going to go there every time and stare at every one and read the ingredients and look at the prices and decide which one to buy. And here's some, just some categories that are, we pretty obviously have category kings in, and they establish themselves in our minds as those kings. And so once we have those, established as those winners in categories, those biases tend to keep them there. So what that all comes back to is the idea that if you're the CEO of a company, one of your jobs is to actually exploit these brain shortcuts. It's actually to condition our minds and make us have those biases in our brains, and so that you can be seen as this category king and embed people in people's brains. And the back end of this that we got from as we talked to the neuroscience folks, is that it takes sustained effort. It's not something that happens with one TV commercial on a Super Bowl. It happens by over and over emphasizing that particular product and that brand and in convincing people that space exists and that you're the king in it. And if you think of the bell curve of the population, you're going to capture some of those early adopters, in those first couple of years. But what happens is that to get to the heart and the meat of the bell curve of what you're trying to influence actually takes that sustained effort over some 6 to 10 years. And that's why we end up with these kinds of time frames that tend to work for any industry, any consumer products, business to business products. It seems to be, this is how fast the majority of people's minds can move. So as a CEO or a company founder, basically, what it comes down to is maybe your most important job is to condition people's brains. This is Steve Jobs conditioning our brains. And when he got up on stage, this is classic Steve Jobs, when he got up on stage to introduce the iPad, he literally got up and he said, "We are creating a new category of product." And he said, we have this new age of digital media. We consume this digital media. The phone is too small. The screen's too small to really enjoy, video and things like that. The laptop's too big. It's too clunky. You can't really sit on your couch and lounge and do it. And so we're going to introduce this new category of product that's made for our times. It's this thing called the tablet, and our product is called the iPad. And he established the idea we didn't know we even had that problem before Steve Jobs got up on stage and said, you have this problem. And then we all go, oh yeah, actually I do have that problem. I would like to have something like that. And by identifying the category and identifying the problem, he convinced us that he had the solution because he was the only one that was smart enough to figure it out. And we go, yeah, no, I guess I do need an iPad. I'll go out and buy one, $400, great. Importantly, though, the idea is, if you think even of the Steve Jobs example, when you think about category, it's not just about the message. It's actually about what you do. It's the strategy of your company. And it informs everything about your company. And we use this chart. This is in the book. And let me explain. So, as many of you probably know very well, right? When a company starts, it basically starts with product design. It's a couple of people have a good idea. We can build this thing, or we see this opportunity, and you go and you build a product, and that's what you're focused on, creating this cool new thing. And then usually the second thing that happens is, okay, I've got this cool new thing that I've created. Now I need a company to build it, sell it, do all those things that a company does. And you start thinking about what kind of company do I want to have? Where do I want to put it? What kind of people do I want to have in it? What's the logo look like? All those things are designing your company. Now, I would guess that most of you and most people who ever start a company basically stop there. Got a product, we got a company, go. And what we found when we studied all of these companies was that the companies that really succeed and really blow it out have a third thing that they think about, and they think about the space they're going into and how to influence it and how to create it and how to develop that category in people's minds. And by seeing the space, by understanding what the space is and what the problem is they're going to solve, it actually comes back and influences all these other things. Because when you see this very clearly, it helps tell you what kind of product to build. And when you see this space very clearly, it helps tell you what kind of company to build. But also, it's a constant motion because whatever the product you've built and the company you've built help influence what the category is that you're looking at. But all of these pieces need to go together to help you to have a really forward-thinking company strategy. So if you want to do this, how do you start to think this way? The idea of looking for what's missing. And that's, if you're looking at a market and it's already there and you're saying, well, that looks like a big market. This whole idea that has been around for a long time of, oh, that's a big opportunity. There's space for, several winners in that particular space. That's just total bull. It's just not. It's not true in digital markets because we go back to in digital markets, winners tend to take all. And so what you want to do is you want to look for a space that's new and that's missing. This is what Airbnb did when they got started. If you think about the story of Airbnb, these two guys in San Francisco had an apartment, a couple of designers, and there was a conference in town that all the hotels were sold out. And they thought, they didn't have much money. They thought, well, hey, we could blow up a couple of air mattresses, put them on the floor, and serve Captain Crunch in the morning, and put this on Craigslist, and maybe we'll get a couple people that would want to, rent this from them. It worked. They quickly realized they thought this, and actually the whole company in the beginning was geared towards the idea of creating space when there were big conferences in town, in any particular town. But they thought realized that there was this missing thing of how do you have these sort of short-term opportunities to rent a place when hotels don't work and you don't want to have a long-term rental on something like Home Away. And they constantly saw a bigger and bigger missing as they went. But this was a new space that they created. In fact, at one point, I was at this big business conference and sat next to the CEO of Marriott. And I turned to him and I said, well, you guys must really hate Airbnb, don't you? And he surprised me. And he said, no, we don't hate them all. We don't even feel like we compete with them. He said, we hate like Expedia and Travelocity because they take their fees take a portion of our, our revenue, but these guys, like, we don't care because they see it as a completely different space.
Okay, just one more for today.
Another way to think is to think different, not just better. If you're entering a space, a market space, with the idea of, well, okay, I see that company is doing this already, and we can go in there and just do it a little bit better, that's not going to, that's a way to have to claw for market share, not a way to like really blow it out as a category king. And so thinking about things, you want to be seen as something that's different, not just better. And this has been going on, in history forever in business. And you're laughing. You had one of these? Your family? So this is the Chrysler Minivan, right? The little background story on the Chrysler Minivan. 1980s. And Chrysler was going bankrupt. This was the time when Japanese cars were on the rise and killing all the US car makers. And Chrysler was suffering the worst. Its back was against the wall. And the leadership at Chrysler, Lee Iacocca was the CEO at the time, was looking at demographic information and realizing that all these baby boomers, the surge in the population, were having all these kids. So there was a big boom in families. And at the time, there were basically two choices if you had a bunch of kids. You could either buy a station wagon, which was just kind of a long car and didn't have as much room as maybe you'd need, or you could buy a regular big old van, which didn't fit in your garage because it was too tall. And so they said, well, can we design a car that's built for, families can hold 4 or 5 kids and fit in the garage and appeal to that particular market? And they came up with this thing called the minivan. Importantly, think about category, right? They created a category of minivan, not a product called the minivan. They created a product called the Plymouth Voyager and the Dodge Caravan, but they established in their minds that you have a family, man, you need a minivan. And then if you need a minivan, then the next thought is, well, who makes the minivan, or who invented this thing? Well, it's Plymouth and Dodge, and those are the people to go to. So this thing basically saved Chrysler in the 1980s. And it saved it by thinking differently from anybody else in the car market. And by the way, category king status is a long-term thing, because you think about the whole thing about biases in our brains, you establish that bias, and it's hard to take away. And it's, what is it, like 40 years later, and Chrysler still owns 50% of the global minivan market. And this was one of my favorites. This is our takeaway from a couple of our favorite Silicon Valley VCs, who said their favorite kind of market is a $0 billion market. And a $0 billion market is a huge opportunity that only you can see. And you have to, and it takes a whole lot of faith and guts, because you have to be able to believe in it, even if others don't. And you have to be able to go and convince investors and convince customers that thing actually exists. But if it's a $0 billion market, you don't have anybody else chasing you yet, because you're imagining this thing from the ground up. And so if you're not if you can't look and say, I'm creating a $0 billion market, you're probably on a path you need to think about. A couple of $0 billion markets, by the way. I have a personal story about AWS. I think seem to be constantly circling back to Jeff Bezos, but as a journalist, I had interviewed him many times from the time they were a small company. And I was 2006. I was at a technology conference in San Francisco, wandering around the floor. I get a ring on my cell phone, and it's the PR person from Amazon who says, can you come up to suite, whatever it was, and Jeff Bezos wants to talk to you. And of course I said, great, I'll be there. And hopped in the elevator, went up. And So I see Bezos and we sit down and he says, "Oh, I want to tell you about something we're thinking of doing at Amazon." And he describes this whole thing about renting our computing power by the SIP. That was the term he used at the time. And this was a very strange concept. I mean, nobody had done anything like this. And so he's explaining all of this to me, and started stumbling over it for a long time, and he kind of finished, and I looked at him and I said, well, so how are you ever gonna explain this to the public? And he said, what do you think I called you up here for? And he seriously was looking for me to write about it in a way that would help him figure out how to talk about it later. But I tell that story in part because he had no idea what AWS was going to become at the time. It was truly a $0 billion market at the time, and he just was throwing it against the wall to try to see if he could create this thing that had never existed before. And similarly, by the way, for this whole 5-hour energy, I mean, it's not just about technology, right? I mean, the guy who started 5-hour energy was wandering around a health food convention. He saw that there were all these energy drinks that were big cans of liquid, and they were being sold in the refrigerator next to Coke and Pepsi and all these other kinds of things. And he goes, well, he's walking around, he's going, well, okay, I'm tired, I need a boost, but I'm not thirsty, I don't want to drink all this stuff. There's got to be a better way. And he created the idea of the energy shot, and in fact, made sure that it was something that was shelf stable so that it didn't have to be sold in a refrigerator next to other drinks. He sold it by the cash register. So it looks like an entirely different category of product. It's not a drink, it's an energy shot. And 5-hour energy now is a $5 billion business. So, $0 billion market, think different, find what's missing.
Okay. So the thing about what this guy's talking about is doesn't necessarily apply to all of us here. I want to make that point that this idea that you have to be the king of the category and you're the only one, I don't think applies to many of us because we're not venture funded, we're not national or global in our perspective. So I think you can have a really good business being in a category that's popular. Even if there is someone in that category that's national, like a Coke or a Pepsi in the case of beverages or these energy drinks, I think you can do really well. And what it's about is setting the guardrails, if you will, of your brand positioning. If your brand positioning is, I'm making this up, if your brand positioning is, let's just say we taste better than Coke and we're a lot cheaper. Okay, so that's a brand positioning for a cola product or a soda product. And I would bet that there are a percentage of the market that would be willing to try a product that tastes better than Coke and is less expensive. My instincts tell me that would be, there are people who would follow that and check that out and sample it and so forth. So my point in this is even though they're talking about dominant, going public, all that kind of stuff, it doesn't change really the thinking behind what category are you in? Are you in your own category? Are you a new category? A category that perhaps could be defined by region or location or type of product? Can you create a category out of what you're doing? I would argue in Sana's case with her egg-related product where you add to eggs, I could argue that she could create a category. I personally don't know. I mean, I'm sure she's done the research, but from my perspective, she's number one in that category. Sana?
That actually, I was just thinking of that. I signed up on a couple of platforms for wholesale to approach, grocery stores or other specialty stores, and they always ask you to pick a category, and I have trouble with that. Where is it in the spice section? Is it seasoning? Is it I mean, I go into the food section and kind of just say other or general or just type up. I mean, it's not really exactly a meal kit either. So yeah, I'm kind of struggling with that, but good to know that I could just make a category of my own.
Yeah, I think you're the first easy keto breakfast kit that's out there. Now I'm just going off the top of my head because I bought the product, I'm eating it, I love it. But from my perspective, looking at it just from my own personal case, I find that eating a keto diet is a pain in the ass, right? You just have to deal with it. It's not the same as just eating anything, which is what I did forever. So here is something that makes my keto choices so much better, so much easier. I can have variety every day just by adding her product to 2 eggs. I put it in the microwave for a minute 30. I personally find that awesome. But so that's an example, though. You're thinking, maybe it's the first something or other, and you should work on that. And I'm happy to work on it with you. But this is a great example. She went to the stores and they said, "Hey, what category are you?" Because that's how they organize their buying and their on their business. And maybe they have a category of new and uncategorized. I don't know. But this is a perfect example. I think all of you have the ability to define what you're doing in some way that makes you a category leader, even if it's just in your region or your local area. It's not national. I think there's a lot of room for competing in areas that consumers understand, right? Consumers understand categories. They understand the different categories, and that's how they're trained to think, really. Like, what is this? Oh, this product is like Coca-Cola. Oh, this product is like, Toyota, whatever. That's how people think. They compare it to products in the category that you're talking about. So it's very important that you figure out what category you're in, and if you need to define your own category, harder, but can be done. And you need to just be thinking about that in addition to your branding, your brand position. Branding and brand positioning, all that stuff really doesn't make as much sense if you don't understand what category the brand is in, right? Me as a consumer, what the hell do I know, right? I don't know what it's a pretty package. I like the packaging, but I'm immediately trying to think about where does this fit in my life with the categories that I look at and pursue, whether it's food or clothing, or, it could be education, it could be, religious stuff, it could be literally anything. I think it's really important when somebody asks you, and I will ask you, I promise, what category are you in? What category are you competing in? Tell me your brand positioning. This is all really, really critical to communicating with your potential customers and potential investors as well. Everybody likes to get a handle on what it is that you're doing. It's really critical. And even though to you, it's as plain as a nose on your face, that doesn't mean that it is for others who are hearing the story for the first time, or running across you on Shop Rural Day or in an ad or et cetera. So we're going to go through this again tomorrow, the other part of it, but I really think I've never heard category brought up in business school. Sana, maybe you went through it in your travels. I never did. I always heard about brand. I always heard about manufacturing. I heard about distribution. These are all things that I was taught in my business school. I never once heard the word category. In my case, I'm old, so that may not be true for you all. I don't know, Allison, what do you think?
I'm kind of like Sana. I have a strange category. My jam is frozen. So is it a dessert, a frozen dessert? Most people, and if I were to say, and it's a reduced sugar, and it doesn't have anything added. I mean, it's natural sugar. It's cane sugar and fruit. But can I legally say something like tastes better than Smucker's and not get in trouble for saying something like that? I mean,
Well, for the number one rule in that sort of thing, which what you're talking about there is really a slogan or an ad handle, ad campaign. It's always better to ask forgiveness than permission. Okay. So the likelihood of Smucker's coming after you, slim or none. Okay. So I wouldn't sweat that. That's really not that relevant. And you can always say, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And so if you get a letter from Smucker's, I would put it up on my Facebook and in my ads immediately and say, boy, we scared the big boys. I actually had this happen to me. I had to tell this story. So I came up with a product that was a muscadine juice made from North Carolina muscadines. It was not alcoholic. It was a juice. And we really used Palm Wonderful, the pomegranate juice, as kind of the model with what we were doing, right? I got a cease and desist letter from Palm that I just loved. So our first name for the company was called Mom Delicious. And the mom was my wife's family, Maxwell. Maxwell's own muscadines was Mom. And they said that we were causing great confusion in the marketplace and consumers would be, confused. And I used that letter for 2 years, showing grocery stores, buyers, everybody. Yeah, well, we decided to call it Carolina Wild because they were nervous about us. We tasted better. We had higher phytonutrients, less sugar. So anyway, don't be afraid of that, saying something like that. But from a category perspective, I truly don't know, Allison. I'm not up on it, but you can study categories. You can probably get it. Sana may even have some good ideas of how you can find categories, but I know the grocery stores have categories. I know there's, I think it's called NAIC, which is a government numbering thing for categories and products, NAIC numbers. There's a variety of ways that you can figure out like what categories are there and where do I fit? You might be in multiple categories, which is not uncommon, right? You could be in multiple, but I can't really answer that off the top of my head. Sana?
I know about the list you're talking about, the NAIC. It's a very long, detailed list. Allison, if you're interested, I can look it up and send you the link. I can post it on the Facebook.
Yeah, that'd be
great. And if you want to just.
all right, thank you.
That has all of the categories and products have a corresponding number that the government has created. And they even have a category said, new. It's not a category yet, but they still have numbers for it. So I think all of you could benefit from taking a look at that list. April, you want to say something?
I do. First and foremost, I have good news to share. I found out on Friday that I am going to get the NCIDA grant, the micro.
Is that the seed or the other one?
The micro.
Oh, the micro. Okay.
Yeah, and then after this time around, we can then do the micro. I'm sorry, the seed next time. So that's exciting.
Congratulations. That's awesome. Yay.
Where's the press release, girl? Where's the press release? Let's see that press release.
They just put it out today. That's why I'm
I want to see your press release.
Oh, wait, I gotta do that.
Talking about them. Who cares about them, right?
I got you.
Okay.
The other thing I was going to say, as far as category is concerned, we considered ourselves, when we were first starting this thing out, making the vegan infant formula as an infant formula, right? So we were going into the baby food category. And so after we did some research, we're very early on in that process of doing research and really diving into the industry, we found out that we couldn't call ourselves an infant formula due to the FDA regulations. So we couldn't put it out to market and market it as an infant formula. So we had to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do? Around that same time, some other brands came and they were doing something similar, like a plant-based infant formula, and they were calling themselves a complete nutrition beverage. And so we had to kind of figure out that in order for us to get our product out on the market so that we can start getting more revenue or getting in revenue, we would have to play around with the name and the verbiage. So sometimes it's almost like a mandatory thing that you have to define your own category. And we also, our phase 1 is going to be the liquid vegan formula, but our phase 2, ultimately, we're going to have a vegan infant formula tablet, which is nowhere on the market. And so we're excited about that. And that's one of the things that stood out in our interview with NC Idea. They were like, right now you only have one competitor. And the only reason why they would even be considered a competitor is because they have a patent on something similar, but they haven't released a product. So I'll probably be tapping you on the shoulder, Dennis, and asking a few more questions to make sure I navigate this the right way.
Yeah, I think this is a great example that, especially when you're doing something new and innovative, this is a chance to define the category, and make a category and be the leader in it. And everyone else, when they're pitching investors, the investors will say, well, how are you going to compete with April Kelly? Right? And you say, well, no, that's not worth doing. I think I'm going to go make hot dogs or something, So.
I have a
Yeah.
question for April. That tablet for infant formula, that is amazing. I mean, I've never heard of anything like that ever. How exactly does that work? Do you like dissolve it in water, or I mean, you would use it just like you would use the formula?
Absolutely. So that's the plan. Right now, we're working on the back end, like the scientific side of it, to make sure that it works how I see it in my head. But yeah, so if you guys are familiar with Airborne, like the Airborne dissolvable tablets or Alka-Seltzer, that's kind of the idea that we're going with. And so they'll be in like the little cute little portable packaging. So you no longer have to carry around the large canisters if you run out, and you'll be able to pop maybe 2 at the most is what we're hoping for. 2 tablets at the most in a 4-ounce bottle. And then if it's an 8-ounce bottle, maybe 4 tablets, but you shake it up, like spring water or filtered water, and you can feed your baby.
You know why I think that's amazing? And I wish you guys actually had this product commercialized like 3 years ago. I have twins and they're 3.5-year-olds. We wanted to continue traveling with the baby, so we did that quite a lot before COVID. So I had these little, like tiny little bottles, like they're not really bottles, they're just like such small containers, like single serve containers, whatever. I would pre-measure the formula for them, and I would just take them along like 5 or 6 of them for a day. So if I had a tablet back then, it would just make things so much simpler. So I think this is just an amazing idea.
Listen, I get it. And that's part of the reason why I don't have twins, but I've ran into some complications early on with my 3rd child. And that was the reason why we even started the idea about making the formula. And then once we kind of got further down that rabbit hole, we were like, how can we make this more convenient? Because that was one of the things that the pain points of our customers, right? We need something that's easy, that's quick, that's convenient, especially as moms are heading back to work after maternity leave. Sometimes they don't have a place at work where they can pump, just so many different pain points. And we're like, we got to make this easier for our people. And so the tablet was the way to do that. But thank you for sharing your story. That definitely motivated me.
I will add on to that. If you can hear me, this is Eva. I'm a mom of triplets. So I used to make formula.
You're not drinking the water around here. I can tell you that much.
So, I used to make formula by batches using distilled water 12 years ago. And I am happy to connect you with Moms of Multiples networks for some of your prototyping once you have your tablets ready to go. What a mom lifesaver this could be for moms of multiple. So awesome.
Yes,
so stoked.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'll definitely be in touch.
So there happens to be a ECU alumni. I can't remember her name, but I remember her company, and it's called Bite, B-I-T-E. And Bite makes a tablet that replaces toothpaste. And I know they did 10 million in sales last year. They've really taken off. They operate out of their apartment. It's this woman and her boyfriend, or I don't know if they're married at this point, but check out Bite toothpaste. And it's, don't ask me how it works. I don't know, but it's a tablet that replaces toothpaste. And you apparently don't have to use a toothbrush, I think is the whole thing. But anyway, that's something I'm familiar with. Okay, well, we've come to the end of another exciting Accelerate Rural class. And I love that you all are sharing and opening up and talking, because you have a lot to offer. So please continue to do so. If you haven't signed up for Shop Rural Day yet, go ahead and do that, because it's getting crowded, and I want to get you on the schedule and hear some of this great stuff. You know, and even in you know, in Shop Earl Day, if your product's not ready, that's okay. You can still lay the foundation and get a bunch of contacts and a bunch of people that you can sell to, because it doesn't cost you any money to participate. Or you can tell them that your first batch is sold out or something. I don't know. I'm sneaky, but you know, something like that might work, and say, we're taking orders, you know, join our waiting list, and you know, lots of different ways to skin a cat. But I do encourage everybody to look at that as an opportunity to really dramatically expand your customer base. At least that's what I think. Anyone else? Yeah.
We just reach out to Grant, right, to sign up.
Yeah, you actually go to shopearlday.org, and it's got an apply here button. I just click on that. And actually what'll happen is you'll be contacted by a guy named Alex, who is our guy for Pop Shop Live, which is a technology provider. And he actually helps you, you know, get on board. You have like a practice session and all that kind of stuff. Annette's been through it, I think. Haven't you, Annette? You want to comment on that, Annette?
It's fairly easy, but I would say one of the things that I have to do is to go ahead and put my catalog in, so it makes it easier for people to buy the products. But it's fun, but it's work. You got to plan. You've got to plan what you're going to do in that hour span of time. You really have to kind of have a sketch of what you're going to do and the timing of what you're going to do.
Yeah, the thing about it is, when she talks about catalog, you can put in up to 10 products. You don't need an e-commerce website. It doesn't need integration with your website. You can change those anytime you want, interchange them. And you also, you don't have to go live just once. You can go live several times. You can actually go live as much as you want, and you can sell even before Shop Earl Day starts. You'll be able to sell on the platform. After Shop Earl Day, you'll be able to sell on the platform. So it's something that's going to be there for you, and you can. It's a great place to try new and different things, because this is a relatively younger audience that's on Pop Shop Live. You might find yourself, maybe you schedule four lives on 11/11 instead of just one, and you also can play around with things like, I know this sounds corny, but like a wheel that you spin and you give a discount for the next 15 minutes, and people go, oh, 50% off, 50% off, and you'll get a big crowd for that kind of stuff. You can have it play a trivia game. You can have little short-term promotions, 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long, all kinds of stuff that you can do to make it more fun. And it shouldn't be like heavy lifting work. It should be fun. Reveal your personality, talk about yourself. You got a funny story you want to tell about starting your business or something that happened. It's a perfect place to do that. Allison, you had something?
I tried to download the Pop Shop Live on my MacBook Pro in the App Store, and it kept giving me a message that it wasn't available in the United States.
Well, that's on your Mac, so you have to do it on your phone.
Well, I did do it on my phone. It worked fine on my phone.
It doesn't work on the Mac computer.
Okay.
Although I know they're working on that.
Okay. And Alex had canceled. I had scheduled I guess when he goes over the Pop Shop Live program, will he reach out and reschedule that time?
Yeah, ping him if you've got his email address, because he's pretty slammed.
Yeah. Okay.
He's a good guy, and he'll do everything he can. But if you have trouble, let me know, and I'll kick his butt. All right.
Just a comment. Yeah. I tried to set up my catalog in my store. I had trouble syncing my Shopify store. It was just not very responsive. And then I thought maybe it would be easier for me to set up my catalog from my computer, but I don't think it has an option to do so. You have to do each individual product with images and everything, descriptions from your phone, which was a lot of work for me. So I did schedule a meeting with Alex. I'm meeting with him on Wednesday, so hopefully he'll be able to help me sync my store. Yeah. But I'll let you guys know if there's an easier way to do this.
Yeah.
If somebody else
Shopify as your e-commerce site, it doesn't integrate with anything else other than Shopify at the moment.
And I had issues with that. It just kind of takes me to a blank page and says nothing is available. And I know I have products available on this store. So hopefully he'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, they'll help you work it out. Also, that's a real good point though, Sana and others. You can make unique combinations of products that you don't offer otherwise during this. For example, you might have some combination of flavors that you don't offer otherwise, and you could offer it on that show as one example. I don't want to make more work, but I just thought you might try that. And you also could conceivably partner with other companies that maybe are helpful to you or in some way supportive of yours, and you can create bundles of stuff that are only available on the show. So just some ideas. All right.
Did you say you can partner? We can partner with other businesses or other products. It doesn't necessarily have to be a product from our company.
No.
Is that?
You can fulfill it.
Yeah, I mean, I could do gift baskets like egg kits
Absolutely.
and other things.
Absolutely. It's
Okay,
wide open,
good.
and you could do all kinds of cool stuff. You could have, and they can be time limited, right? You could just make some kind of special deal only for the next 15 minutes or the next 30 minutes. And and you can schedule multiple shows. You don't have to just do one. You can go live the whole 12 hours if you want. I don't care. But yeah, you can combine, put together some ideas that they can't get anywhere else. And who knows, that might turn out to be something that you end up doing. This is a good test. It's a market test. And long as it can be shipped, it's available.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I'm going to say goodbye.